Being delusional is a gift. Just know which way you need to tune the dial in order to accomplish the dreams of your desires.
Welcome to the Contrarian Capitalist Podcast, the ultimate destination for accredited investors and entrepreneurs seeking alternative wealth-building strategies. Discover how to fast-track your journey to wealth and time freedom by thinking outside the box. If you're ready to join the ranks of the Contrarian Capitalists and learn the most effective ways to reach your financial goals faster, you're in the right place. Let's get started with today's episode of the Contrarian Capitalist Podcast.
Thank you once again for joining another episode of the Contrarian Capitalist Podcast. I'm your host and your favorite silverback, Sylvania Harrod. And on today's episode, I'm going to talk to you about the beauty of being delusional. So why in the hell would I ever say something like the beauty of being delusional? Is because in order to be a contrarian, there has to be a little bit of delusionalness. I don't know if that's a word, but I'm going to make it a word. Delusionalness associated with what you're doing, because you have this natural ability of seeing things that may not exist currently. Because if you're going to go with whatever the status quo is, that's a majority thinking of what people think. Need to be able to be there. I need to, in the US, I need to grow up, get a good education, go to a good college, get a good job, work there for 40 years. Well, there's a certain subset of us that says, screw that. I ain't doing that, playa. I want to go ahead and do things a little bit differently. Why do I have to wait until my best years of my life in my 60s and 70s to actually start living of my own accord? Why can't I do that in my 30s, my 20s, 40s, whatever it is? Like, just sooner than the status quo. And so in different sections of life, you have to be delusional because you're challenging the path that the everyday person is going. So I just finished up the Vince McMahon documentary. Vince McMahon was the person who grew the World Wrestling Federation to astronomical heights. So Vince's dad, who he did not really know, had gone ahead and started a smaller federation of wrestling called the WWF. And so at that period of time, wrestling was this weird carnival taboo type of thing that happened to be there. And so Vince really was drawn towards it, because I'm here to also tell you, I believe nature is much stronger than nurture. Every day I have conversations with people, and what I look to get to is who they were as a child. Because if they were as a child, as a person that was like stubborn or like determined or driven or challenged things in general, may have been the class clown, things to go there, I can learn a lot about you because I'm looking for the pattern. Doesn't mean that this is it, because it's not black and white. But I'm just saying, based upon probability, there's a strong chance that I can identify what child you were as a kid. Once I understand a little bit about your upbringing and I spend time around you, right? Some people are late bloomers, some are earlier bloomers, but I know that they had certain desires. So Vince McMahon goes through, finally gets introduced to who his birth father is, and finds out about wrestling. And Vince had this idea of like, I want to make wrestling mainstream. He was delusional about it. Just think about this, right? In the 70s, 80s, nothing's getting on national TV at that period of time, because you got to look at what society was in American culture. It was like Leave It or Beaver times. You had 70s. You had people coming back from Vietnam. Things were all cool and groovy. We're getting to a different phase before we move into the greed is good era in the 80s, right? Nobody gives a crap about no wrestling or things to be able to be there. But Vince saw it. He could see what it possibly could be. So Vince decides to go ahead and take the company from his dad. He buys his dad out. And then at that period of time, wrestling was very regional. If you were in the Northeast and that was where you were, because wrestlers had to travel and do multiple nights, like 200 nights a week, you kept it to a certain territory, because also it wasn't at the phase where travel and things were really dialed in to be able to be there. But Vince could see it. He knew that one day it was going to be a possibility. So he goes ahead and he decides, after he takes over the company, I want to buy all of them and make this a national program. So he announces it as a national program before anybody else made it a national program. He goes for it. And so they were like, what's going on? And then all of a sudden he starts tracking the right people, attracting the right things in there to be able to go. And it actually pissed off his own birth father. It's like, and he says it constantly. Had he told his dad what he was going to do, his dad would have never sold him the company. And so he goes on this hell-bent mission to go do this. So he goes through, starts acquiring different things over the span of time. And so as he acquires them over a span of time, he gets to a phase where like it does start becoming mainstream. And right when things look like they weren't going to be there, Vince always persevered. It didn't matter if it was Ted Turner, who had way more money than comes in and starts a new group. They come in second place for a couple years, but a competitor in the sport of business loves being number two. Number one is the hardest place to possibly be, because if I'm number two, I got a clear shot if I know what pace I need to get to in order to get there. If I'm number one, I have no idea what pace I need to run at, because I don't know if that person's throttling back or being able to do things. So I just got to run as hard as I possibly can. And so Vince gets knocked down to be able to be there. And then it goes through multiple different iterations. There's things that are ups and downs. I'll save you roughly about 10 minutes of explaining everything he had to go through and every challenge he had to be able to go through to tell this one story. And you can look at it. He sold back in, I don't want to say it was last year, 2023. He went ahead and sold it, walked away with a couple $1 billion in his pocket. So how do you take something that's worth a couple $100,000 and then over the span of 40 years walk away with a couple $1 billion? How you do that is you have to have the right relationships and you have to be the right operator. A couple other pieces, but I'll just leave you on those two right there. You have to be the right operator. Who in the hell is going to sit there and weather those different storms to be able to go through there? And I'm not here to talk about Vince McMahon as the person, right? Like, because the other thing I find is that people can't compartmentalize that Vince McMahon as the operator of a company. I can see where he started, where he finished. Okay, I know you had to be delusional along the way. Him as a person, disgusting. The things that he was doing in the suits and all the kind of things to be able to be, the things he had to treat people, disgusting. I am not going to Vince McMahon and asking him about relationship advice. I am not going to him to talk about like how to raise children. What I will, when it comes to that type of person, is talk to him when it comes to how did you weather the storm? What were the things you did when competition showed up? What were the different moments? What was the dark nights of the soul like? That's who you want in your corner in those type of moments. One of my good friends, Dylan, said this week, I don't drink with a man who doesn't have scars, because that means he was never on the battlefield. And that made sense to me. I go, shit, that's right. Because in contact sports, I don't care if you started in the league and you were on a winning team. What was it like when you had a down year? The game doesn't really start until you have some level of adversity. That's when you know you're going against the right competition. And so as you're building these alternative strategies and things you need to be able to do, you need to realize you're going to get some scars. If you don't want scars, stay in the slow lane. You know, you're never going to know what's possible. The number one thing people regret when they die is who they spent time with. Like, did they spend enough time with the ones they loved? Number two, the things they were unwilling to try that they really wanted to try. It's kind of a 1A, 1B, right? I would much rather just know that if I'm going to get to an end destination, why don't I plan the destination now? Have the right relationships today. Swing for the fences you want to actually swing for. Know that no matter what, it's never going to be like what you think it's going to be, because our body and brain naturally want to think it as more cautious as it's going to be, or it's going to think of it as like more extreme than what's going to be. We just know that. Like, you just look at life. Whatever you thought it was going to be is not going to be that way. Okay, that's fine. If I understand that part of the equation, then it's a matter of me being at a place where I go, I'm just going to let come what's going to come. Be at peace with it, because I know I'm driving in the direction that I want to go. If I get a flat tire, that's out of my control. Shit, change the tire, get back up, go through it. Those were a lot of things Vince would say. No matter what was going on in his personal life, he was wired to the business. You know, the beautiful thing about it is that I get it. As an investor in general, I have to be able to compartmentalize things. Hey, guess what? Maybe I don't physically feel well. That's fine. The market doesn't care if I feel well. The market doesn't give a shit about my feelings. What it cares about is, can you deliver results? Because if you think you're going to go down this path and recognize that there's going to be days where you're like, I ain't doing nothing. And there's going to be days where it's like, I'm all in. I'm the most powerful being in the world. That's human. That's being a human. That's part of being humanity. Embrace your humanity. Realize that there's ebbs and flows for a reason. And you just do. You chip away and you chip away and you chip away at the things that you love to do. You'll be amazed at the outcome you come with, because we choose to be delusional. We need to be delusional in some element. It's a spectrum of delusional, you know? But if I look at that spectrum and I look at the game, some have way more delusion than others. And they're normally rewarded for it, because we're rewarded in the market in direct correlation of the level of the problem we solve. If we look at Elon Musk, I don't know where he's going to be, but at the recording of this episode, he was the first person that we know of publicly that is worth over $400 billion. Guess what, Bubba? Look at the size of the problems he solves. Multi-trillions of dollars. And in industries that everybody thought he was delusional. You can't make a bank. Nobody's going to want to bank online. You can't get a rocket and get it to land back down. Nobody's going to give a crap about like electric cars. They're not cool. They're boring. Combustion, you know, the sound of the motor and the engine to be able to be there. Nobody's going to care about those things. And once again, the dude shows up, doesn't care. He has a desire in his heart. He's going to make it work. Doesn't mean that everything he does is going to work. But it does mean he will stay on the path. He will consistently show up, and he will consistently execute over time. So, to land the plane and recap really quickly, being delusional is a gift. Just know which way you need to tune the dial in order to accomplish the dreams of your desires. So as always, you can find me on all social media platforms at Sylvania Harrod. I love DMs. I love messages, things to be able to be there. I love people telling me I'm wrong, because guess what? There's a possibility it may be true. Challenge different things that I have there. Like, even we can hop on an episode and riff about it. I love that, because here's what's going to happen. Diversity of thought makes all things possible. So you can find me on all social media platforms at Sylvania Harrod. Shoot me a DM, shoot me a message. If all, stay grateful, everybody. And until the next episode, cheers.